Hey guys, it's Anna from Bright Lane Gardens. It's the second week in September here in northern Michigan, and it is seed collection season. Fall is one of my favorite seasons. It's the best time to collect your seeds for next year's plantings, and butterfly weed is a super simple plant to collect your seeds from. If you're new to native gardening, seed collection might be intimidating at first, but I promise you it's so worth it. There's a lot of plants that are very easy to collect seeds from. It's a really sustainable way to grow your gardens year after year without spending a penny. Butterfly weed specifically is a super easy plant to collect seeds from. The seed pods are very obvious. The seeds are nice and large, easy to collect and easy to store. So this is going to be a quick tutorial. This is great for anyone from beginners through experts and anyone that's interested in growing your own native garden. First things first, we have to make sure we can find seed pods that are ready to be harvested. So follow me over to my native plot behind me here. We're going to seek out some seed pods that are ready to be harvested, and I'll show you exactly what I do to harvest those. So I have a mature butterfly weed plant in front of me. This is 2 seasons old, so I planted him from a seedling 2 years ago, and it's been through 2 full seasons. As you can see, it's quite a mature plant. It's about 2 feet tall. We're pretty much at maximum size here, and it has multiple sprigs of fresh growth on it. It's a very healthy, robust plant, and as such, it has produced some really lovely seed pods for me this year, which I'm very excited about. So these long tubular structures right at the top here, these are the seed pods for my butterfly weed. If you've ever harvested milkweed seed pods before, these are super similar. This is also a member of the milkweed family, so it reproduces in a very similar way. Now, these seed pods up here are not yet ready to be harvested, and I know that for a few key reasons. First and foremost, they're still a really lush green color, and they don't have too much of a red tint to them yet. So these are still really pliable, very squishy to the touch. They don't feel dry at all. A seed pod that's ready to be harvested is going to be brown. It's going to have a lot of brown or red coloring on it. You will be able to squish it just a little bit, but it's going to have more of a papery type feel to it. It's not going to feel fresh at all. Another sign that's a really key indicator that a seed pod is ready to be harvested is if it cracks right down the center when you squeeze it. So you might be able to see this natural seam that goes up and down this front surface here. This is actually the seam that will naturally pop open once the seed pod dries out enough, and that's what enables the seeds to be exposed to the wind, which will of course carry these seeds across the yard and enable the plant to reproduce and multiply. Now you do see some reddish hue here. This is really just caused by the sun. So you'll notice that on the top here where the sun is hitting the seed pod, it's red. But then on the underside of it, it's still that bright fluorescent green. So these seed pods are just too young and too immature. They're not quite ready to be harvested yet. If you were to harvest the seed pod now, there's a good chance that the seeds wouldn't be viable because they're not fully produced. And they also contain a little bit too much moisture for you to store them successfully. So let's move on to some other seed pods. These seed pods over here have a lot more of this red tint to them. They definitely feel a little more dry to the touch. I can feel some additional space in there and some fully developed seeds. These ones still aren't quite ready to be harvested because when I squish them, that center seam still is not popping open. However, these will be ready in the next week or so here, especially if we get some nice hot dry weather. These are going to dry out really nicely. You can kind of feel the underside of this one. So let's pick this one just as an experiment so you can see what these seeds look like when they're not fully ready to be harvested yet. As you can see, again, the underside of this one is still really green, even though the top side does have that nice reddish color there. So let's take this into our garden shop. We'll experiment. We'll open this one up and see what it looks like. And we have another seed pod over here. This plant just produced the one this year. This is a younger plant, so that's pretty typical for a plant that's about a year or 2 old, just to have one or a handful of seed pods on it. Again, this one's not quite ready for harvest yet, but he will be very soon. This plant here in front of me is about 2 seasons old, so I planted him at the beginning of last summer, and as you can see, it's already a pretty mature plant. I have several seed pods on this stem here. They are all still pretty green, very squishy to the touch, and very lush, not dried out at all. So these guys aren't ready, but I'm super thrilled with just how many seeds this singular plant is producing. However, if you look at the front here, This seed head is ready. He's so ready that he actually split open on his own. If you feel that outer shell, it's nice and crispy, almost feels like a corn husk type feeling. And these seeds are bursting at the seams. They are ready to come out right now. So this seed head here is absolutely ready to be harvested. Obviously, when they're already opened like this, it's a lot easier to tell, but sometimes it's hard to get to these before the birds get to them or before the wind decides to take them and blow them right away. So I'm super excited that we found a seed head that's ready to be harvested. I'm going to go ahead and gently pluck this guy right from the stem. I want to be very careful not to damage the rest of the plant when I do that. And I also want to be careful that none of these blow away as I walk over to my garden shop here. So I'm going to clasp my hand over the top of this, and let's go ahead, head on over to my garden shop, and I'll show you how I get them ready for storage. So first things first, I want to get everything that's inside of this shell here outside of the shell. So we're just going to kind of gently pull that. Make sure you check it, because look at all those seeds that were kind of stuck in there. And these are very ready because they're already starting to fall off from their tails. So I'm actually going to scooch these guys off to the side here. Now we're left with this little ball of fluff. So I'm gently going to peel these apart, and I'm going to see how many more I can get separated from that silk. I don't like to store it with the silk. As a general rule of thumb, anytime you're storing seeds for any sort of period of time, even if it's just one season, you want to make sure you have as little organic material in with the seeds as possible, because of course that increases your risk of rot or mold, which is one of the biggest factors that can make your seeds not be viable for the following season. So I'm trying to get all this fluff off here, which of course loves to stick to me, stick to my fingers. That's what makes it so successful when it tries to reproduce in the wild, because it sticks to animals, it sticks to birds, it'll stick to trees, and it makes it really easy for the plant to reproduce, which is great because butterfly weed is so beautiful. And these are all the seeds that I was able to retrieve from a single pod on a single plant. So keep in mind, this pod was one of 6 on that plant. And this pod alone, which it was a relatively small pod overall, this singular pod here produced, looks like about 15 to 20 seeds for me. So with that whole plant, as long as I harvest all of those pods, I'm going to get probably 60 to 80 seeds, which is incredible if you think about how much you paid for that one singular plant, just how many times you can reproduce with that singular plant. Now, of course, if I want to plant these seeds for next season, I have to make sure that they'll actually survive the winter months. That means I need really good seed storage. So of course, I'm a total plant nerd. I have the dorkiest seed storage case ever, which I'm obsessed with. This is actually my second one because I already filled up the first one. It comes with these nice little plastic containers. I do encourage you to use something that's solid, like a glass or a plastic Tupperware container, over the paper envelopes, only because the paper envelopes are susceptible to moisture, including humidity in the air. So if you plan on storing these in a basement or a garage or any place that has dampness in the air, you're really going to want to opt for a plastic storage container over a paper envelope. All I'm going to do is slip these guys in here because they are totally dried out. I can tell that these are dried out because the edges are nice and crispy. They're almost a little wavy, kind of like paper that got wet and has dried out. So these seeds are totally dried out and ready to be stored, which is fantastic. It allows me to skip the step of drying out. I got all of my seeds in there. And the last step, which is a very important one, is of course to label. I love using common names because I think it makes it really accessible for everyone. This is of course my butterfly weed or butterfly milkweed. However, if you are keeping track of all of your native plants and really have several different varieties of each native plant, you're going to want to use the scientific name just to keep it straight. So this is Asclepias tuberosa. And the last thing that you're going to want to add is definitely the month and year that you harvested those seeds. Typically, anytime you're harvesting native seeds, I always encourage you to plant it within the next 2 years. Now, it is totally possible for those seeds to last longer than that 2-year mark, but the viability of them does seem to go down over time. So don't hoard them or hold on to them for an extended period of time, hoping that you'll plant a magnificent garden one of these days. You're better off doing it in smaller spurts and just planting them in those first 2 years. Once you have your label made, pop that right on top there. And I'm just going to put that right back into my kit and save it with my other seeds. A few things to note, your butterfly milkweed does need a cold stratification period before you plant them next spring. If you've never worked with cold stratifying seeds before, I promise you it's a really easy process. I have a full tutorial that I'll link up above as well as in the description below. Cold stratification is another one of those things, just like seed collection, that was really intimidating to me at first, but once I did it my first time, I was like, wow, this is so easy. I can't believe I felt so intimidated by this. So don't get intimidated by it. Follow my tutorial. It's so easy. All you need is a plastic baggie and a refrigerator. You'll be able to cold stratify all of your native seeds that you collect this year so you can have a successful planting next spring. That's all I have for my fast and easy seed collection tutorial today. I am going to post an update on this immature seed pod here that I'm going to allow to dry out a little bit more. I'll let you know if these seeds end up turning brown and if we have a viable seed to plant next year in the spring. If you have any questions on my seed collection methods for butterfly milkweed or any of my native plants that I've talked about, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. It seriously helps out small businesses like ours so much. I appreciate you spending time on our channel, and I sure hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.